I recently bought the new Canon vlogging camera for my YouTube channel, but with how good phones have become, I wonder if it actually makes sense to have a point-and-shoot camera instead of a flagship phone like the iPhone 16 Pro Max or the Galaxy S25 Ultra. Naturally, I decided to compare these three devices to each other. But no matter what camera you use, you can always create a website with our sponsor Squarespace in only a few minutes and upload them there. Let's start with a blind test. I'm playing footage from camera A right before sunset in a park here in Vienna. Then I switch to camera B, and you probably notice the contrast is a bit higher on this camera. After that, it is time to switch to camera C in the same lighting conditions as the other two cameras. Guess which one is which? You probably guessed right that camera A and B are the phones. Camera A was the Galaxy S25 Ultra and camera B was the iPhone. They both have characteristics of a phone, which are high dynamic range, sharp imaging, and also high contrast. Camera C was the Canon V1, which, because of the ND filter, has a lower shutter speed that gives it a more natural look, and the footage is softer. On the normal default profile, the phones often give better dynamic range. For example, the highlights are more overblown on the Canon in the sky. On the bright side, Canon gives the most accurate skin tone. Galaxy is more vivid, while iPhone gives a contrasty look. Usually in situations where dynamic range is high, meaning there is a huge gap in highlights and shadows, phones like the Galaxy on the left and iPhone on the right manage the scene better through computational photography and by increasing the shadows in the right places. On the normal default profile, consumer cameras often struggle to keep the balance in these difficult scenes, mostly because the default profile is 8-bit, but also because of the lack of computational videography. To remedy this, you have to shoot in 10-bit on Canon and color grade your footage. On a normal profile, the Canon is 8-bit, not 10-bit. You have two options basically to go to 10-bit. You can either use the C-Log 3 or you can also use the PQ mode. I personally prefer the PQ mode. It is easier to also expose your footage. With C-Log is a little bit different and it's a little bit difficult, so that's the profile that I personally go for. And you can immediately see that in HDR PQ mode, the Canon is retaining dynamic range similar to a smartphone. The difference is that both Galaxy and iPhone are still a bit more oversharpened compared to the Canon here. The iPhone videos are often very contrasty, especially in a sunny situation where the shutter speed is elevated. The colors are also often muted. The Canon HDR PQ mode is rather flat, and with a bit of adjustment, you can make it look similar to a smartphone without the downsides and keep the scene more natural. Samsung Galaxy footage is often more vivid than the iPhone and has more punchy colors, but I personally like the skin tone of Tanya in this footage, and overall, the scene is balanced. If we compare the Canon to the iPhone side by side, the Canon gives this filmy look, the footage is softer, it has a vibe to it, and in general, it looks less digital. Same goes if we compare Canon to the Galaxy side by side. The Galaxy overall is nice and balanced, but the colors can sometimes be too vivid and distracting if we are trying to tell a story. Of course, with the phones, you can also shoot in log and color grade them however you want. But before we talk about log, I want to tell you that I also decided to put some of the photos I take on my new website called Tecmo Wallpaper, which I created using a Squarespace in just a few minutes. The link is in the description, so you can download them for free. With a Squarespace, you can start with the Blueprint AI and build a website super quickly and efficiently in just a few simple steps. The website building tool is incredibly intuitive, and you don't need any experience since everything is just drag and drop. You can also make some of the content on your website members only and monetize it. Plus, you can sell your online courses, blog posts, and videos without any hassle. They have award-winning templates that are completely free. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you are ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/techmo to save 10% off your first purchase. You are gonna love it. All of these devices have an implementation of log. So for Canon, it is C-Log 3, which is quite famous. Then for Apple, you have the Apple log, and also for the Galaxy this year, they also introduced their own version of log, so you can color grade your footage as you want. The Apple log is one of the easiest log formats to work with. Generally speaking, I have a good time color grading it. You get tons of options, and the footage is not overly processed. The Canon C-Log 3 gives you more flexibility though, because even though Apple does not process the log as much as the normal profile, the footage is still heavily processed. That's not the case for Canon. For the Galaxy, the log is a bit limited, and I also noticed that the footage is too sharp for my taste and a bit too processed. Generally speaking, with the introduction of log in mobile phones, you have even less reason to buy a dedicated camera. Yes, the log footage of phones is still more processed and sharper, but you at least get to grade the colors as you please. So one of the main things about the phones is that also the stabilization is much better. There are two reasons. One is computational photography, but also the sensor size is smaller, and when you have a smaller sensor size, it is also easier to stabilize the footage. The Canon V1 has both optical and digital stabilization, but if you look at the footage, it is still noticeably more bouncy compared to the phones. With the Canon, if you want to achieve the same level, you have to use a gimbal. One important point that may make you opt for the Canon instead of the phones is that the Canon has a 16 to 50mm f2.8 to f4.5 lens, which is 1.4 inches and larger than the phones. The phones have an ultra-wide and wide lens. Galaxy has two telephoto lenses, one 3x and one 5x, and iPhone has one telephoto lens, which is 5x zoom. Also, the phone's sensors are all tiny, except from the main sensor, which is half decent. But we should also note that the aperture in the phones are fixed, so you can't really control the amount of light that gets seen. At the widest focal length, the Galaxy and iPhone are wider than the Canon, as you can see here. On the ultra-wide lens, they have the same characteristic we talked about. Galaxy is vivid, Canon is neutral and has a filmic vibe to it, while iPhone gives better dynamic range, but is also contrasty. With the main lens, the phones are at 23mm. The Galaxy here raised the shadows, the Canon was not able to expose correctly for the tiny bit of a sky on top, and the iPhone has a bit too much green in the white balance. I took this photo with 3x zoom, which is the maximum Canon's focal length. The iPhone here is cropping with the main lens. Canon's skin tone is simply amazing in this picture. Galaxy has too much orange and iPhone has too much green. One cool thing about the phone is that they have that extra 5x telephoto lens, which gives them extra range to shoot portrait photos. I found the telephoto lenses very useful in landscape shots. For example, I captured this one using the 3x zoom, which is the maximum the Canon can go. In the next shot, I zoom 5x on the phones, but Canon cannot keep up. The phones can go even further and use AI to reconstruct parts of the image. For example, this photo was taken at 30x zoom in the bird park, and for a camera to shoot this image, you would need a heavy lens to carry. That said, the Canon lens is continuous, meaning if you zoom, let's say 2x, you still get the best quality, while the phones crop the image and the quality drops. For example, you can see in this picture, the Canon is doing a fantastic job at that 2x zoom, while the iPhone captured the image grainy. Galaxy did a better job than the iPhone though. Another example at 2x zoom, where not only the optical processing of the image better on the Canon, but I also prefer the overall processing, as the phone simply raised the shadows too much and there is no background and subject separation anymore. Overall, there is a certain look to the camera that's difficult to replicate on phones. The phones usually try to compensate for that look by raising shadows, adding contrast, and increasing vividness, since at the end of the day, physics limits their hardware capability. For example, in this video with the ultra-wide lens on the phones, you can see that the foreground has the same lighting as the background, since the phones analyze the scene using computational videography and increase the exposure in places that would normally be dark, like in the Canon's footage. Also at night, you might think the larger sensor of the Canon is going to save the day, and to an extent, that's true. But let's not forget that the phones have powerful processors that not only handle denoising, but also run other algorithms to make the footage look brighter even in low light conditions. So it's not a given that you automatically get a better image out of the Canon, but it's not always just about the footage quality. One of the main reasons that I use a camera instead of phone for vlogging and also for YouTube is the SD card that you have. Sometimes at the end of the day, I have 80 gigabytes to 100 gigabytes of data, if not more, and it is such a pain when you have to transfer the files from your phone to your computers, whereas with the camera, you can just pull the SD card out and put it on your MacBook or laptop or whatever you have. On the other side, the phones have a bright display, and if you are shooting videos or photos outside, it is easier to look into the display of the phones, especially since the Canon V1 does not have a viewfinder. Also, you have all your social media apps on your phone if you decide to share your life with your friends or family or millions of strangers like I do. So should you buy a point and shoot camera like the Canon V1? I personally am going to continue buying them because the look you get from the camera is not comparable to a phone. The phone overprocesses the images and videos. That said, this is more of a passion and a hobby of mine, and if you are not into videography and photography, the chances that you get a decent video or photo from your smartphone are much higher than from fiddling with a camera. The phone companies are spending millions, if not billions of dollars on R&D to master their software, and I can comfortably tell you that for most people, having a camera that's always in their pocket makes much more sense than buying a dedicated one. But there's always a market for these point-and-shoot cameras for people like myself who simply enjoy the process of capturing photos and videos with them. If you want to know more about the Canon V1, I did a full comparison of the Canon V1 versus the Sony ZV-1 Mark II, which you can watch next. Thanks for tuning into Techmo, and I will see you in the next one.